Tonight I want us to explore Buddha's teachings on the Four Brahma Viharas, also referred to as the Four Divine Abodes. These four are, as I mentioned previously, first, loving kindness; second, compassion; three, sympathetic joy, which always was one that I was curious about when I would hear that; and equanimity. Buddha states that his teachings are about suffering and the ending of suffering, that his teachings are about suffering and the ending of suffering. His call is for us to pay attention to how we induce our own suffering and also our own happiness. To pay attention on and off the cushion to both allows us to experience what causes and conditions we might reinforce, leading to more suffering or more happiness. The Brahma Viharas are one of many instructions or paths the Buddha taught, providing us with a multitude of roads to awakening. Other teachings include the Four Noble Truths, the Fourfold Path, the Five Hindrances. He liked numbers. The Buddha reinforced and emphasized the importance of the Brahma Viharas in many ways. Most clearly is his assurances of the bounty or many benefits that accrue from those who follow the path of the Four Brahma Viharas. Let me see if I got that. Let me just get this out of my mask. I left it in my purse. This is from Bhikkhu Bodhi, discussing the four assurances from the Buddha that we gain from living the path of the Four Brahma Viharas. And it comes from Bhikkhu Bodhi's book, In Buddha's Words. Then, noble disciple, devoid of covetousness, devoid of ill will, unconfused, clearly comprehending, ever mindful, dwells pervading 1/4 of the mind imbued with loving kindness, likewise the 2nd quarter of the mind, the 3rd quarter of the mind, and the 4th quarter of the mind. Thus above and below, across and everywhere, and to all as to himself, and as to all as to himself. He dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, vast, exalted, measureless, without hostility and without ill will. He dwells there, pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with compassion, the other with altruistic joy, and the last with equanimity. And likewise the 2nd quarter, the 3rd quarter, and the 4th quarter. Thus above, below, across, and everywhere, and to all as to himself, he dwells pervading the entire world with a mind imbued with equanimity, vast, exalted, measureless, without hostility and without ill will. When the noble disciple has thus made his mind free of enmity, free of ill will, uncorrupted and pure, he has won 4 assurances. The first assurance is that he has won is this: if there is another world, and if good and bad deeds bear fruit and yield results, it is possible that the breakup of the body after death, I shall arise in a good destination in the heavenly world. The second assurance he has won is that there is no other world if good and bad deeds do not bear fruit and yield results. Then I shall also live happily, free of enmity and ill will. Thus I do not intend evil for anyone. How can suffering afflict me, one who does no evil deed? And the fourth assurance is that he has won. Suppose evil does not befall the evildoer, then right here I see myself purified in both aspects. This noble disciple has thus made his mind free of enmity, free of ill will, uncorrupted, pure, and he has won these four assurances in his life. Again, this quote from Ayakema that I read during our meditation. We have four friends, the Brahma Viharas, in our hearts waiting to do our bidding. But we also have enemies sitting there, waiting to jump out at any given moment. They are never at rest. She continues, the problem is that we are not diligent enough to throw out the enemies and only cultivate our friends. She continues, loving kindness is a quality of the heart that makes no distinction between any living being. Buddha instructed that one should love all beings just as a mother loves her only child. This is the work. Quote, unless one is willing to purify oneself until all beings are considered as though one's children, one hasn't understood loving kindness and its importance. None of us is perfectly lovable. Since we are not perfectly lovable, why do we expect that from others? Since we are not perfectly lovable, why then do we expect this from others? She goes on to say that our hearts need training. The more loving kindness there is in the heart, the more other people are taken into the heart. There is less room for ego and less of I, me, mine. When others are taken into the heart, the self has to step aside and make room. When others are taken into our hearts, the self has to step aside and make room. Remember these teachings as aspiration, something to work toward with loving kindness for yourself first as you navigate, or all of us navigate, this difficult, deep process. Nevertheless, it takes commitment and practice, diligence. This process does not come by accident or chance. It takes determination. I recall reading about loving kindness a long, long time ago and raising my eyes like this, like, oh, sure, really, like I can do all of that, and feeling it would be impossible for me. But I truly have felt a welcome sense of change after years of practice. Which can be particularly difficult for me with certain human beings in my life, and as well with terrible actions in this world. But again, Buddha again stresses loving kindness for all. And just in case we might question the positive power of loving kindness, here is an added benefit discussed by the Buddha. I found this during my training, which had a profound impact on me. I went around the room and I was reading it to everybody. I was so excited about it. Because as we all know, there are people in this world and in our lives who make it very hard to feel kindness for them. Here's the quote from Buddha on the power of loving kindness. And just as in the night, at the moment of dawn, the morning star shines forth, brilliant, ever so, whatever grounds there are for making merit productive of a future birth, all these do not equal a 16th part of the liberation of the mind through loving kindness. All these do not equal a 16th part of the liberation of the mind through loving kindness. I hope that you remember when I was first discussing this tonight, the quote that I read from Ayakema. It discusses Buddhist teachings and that each of us have 4 friends, the Brahma Viharas, and 2 enemies for each one of the Brahma Viharas. Here is her understanding of these 4 and their enemies. We have 4 friends, also called divine abodes, in our hearts waiting to do our bidding. But we also have enemies sitting there, waiting to jump out at any given moment. They are never at rest. These are the far enemy, and the second is known as the near enemy, and that's what we're going to explore tonight. So, for example, with loving kindness, the first of the Brahma Viharas, the far enemy of loving kindness is hatred. And the near enemy of loving kindness is clinging. Noting that as we go along with all of the Brahma Viharas with regard to their enemies, their far enemy is always something completely the opposite. And the near enemy is something akin to loving kindness, but has some sense of corruption. It's not quite loving kindness. There's just a little bit of corruption in it. So, for example, the near enemy with regard to loving kindness is clinging. It's not true, simple loving kindness. It's not just simply for that place of depth, but in fact, a sense of clinging, of needing. And the 3 remaining divining abodes are compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. The second divine abode, compassion, is described very clearly by the Buddha. Pity arises when we are sorry for someone. Compassion is when we are sorry with someone. Compassion is when we are sorry with someone, being with them. Pity is not compassion. Compassion is empathy, to feel and be there with another in the areas of suffering. And as Buddha said, there is nobody without suffering on this earth. This is the first noble truth in Buddha's teachings. So let's just take a moment now, if you can settle into your chair or cushion. And closing your eyes, going inward. And let's reflect first on loving kindness. How difficult is it for you, or How easy is it for you in your personal life with regard to loving kindness? Is your attitude and your process in loving kindness different with different people? Perhaps you can think of one or two people where loving kindness flows easily as you hold them in your mind and in your heart. And perhaps there are others where loving kindness does not arise so quickly or is a struggle. And sometimes it's very hard to sit in the midst of loving kindness with certain people in our lives. And certainly with the activities that have been going on in this country and the world lately. Seems almost impossible. And yet this is the request. This is the instruction from the Buddha. To love as if this person was your only child. Loving kindness. And in your life now, with regard to loving compassion, is there an individual who comes to mind who might benefit not from pity, but from compassion, and could benefit by your presence over the phone or in person? As they work out whatever issue it is that causes you to be concerned or certainly aware of their predicament or issues, worries, disease, aging. Buddha taught that meditation and reading and the following of the suttas assisted in not only a better life on earth, but later. Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us quite directly about compassion. Here's a partial part of his poem called Call Me by My True Names, and it deals with compassion. I am the mayfly metamorphosizing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird which, when spring comes, arrives in time to eat the mayfly. I am the frog swimming happily in a clear pond, and I am also the grass snake, who, approaching in silence, feeds itself on the frog. And I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks. And I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. And I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughs at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and so the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion. The third Brahma Vihara is sympathetic joy. Here's Ayakema again discussing sympathetic joy. This is the joy with or for others, for their gain, for their happiness, and for their success. Joy for others is a sure antidote for depression. And joy with others is also good karma making. Sympathetic joy is the joy with or for others, for their gain, their happiness, and their success. Rather than being jealous or feeling competitive or focused on ourselves, this abode is focused on the other, on other people, not at all for ourselves. I know that early on when I was studying and I came across sympathetic joy and hadn't read and had an understanding of it, that I thought it had something to do with sympathy. And I remember as I've worked with different students, and many times they will come up as well and talk about it from the perspective of sympathy, more like pity than this more clear understanding. So we have four friends. So as further with regard to sympathetic joy, if we notice while meditating that we have shifted to comparing me, mine, I, it is a sure sign that we need to return our focus with good intentions to the other. In this instance, those enemies, the far enemy of sympathetic joy is envy, the opposite. While the near enemy is hypocrisy or affectation, feeling one thing but saying another. So the far enemy is envy, wanting something, from that person or instead of that person. And the near enemy is affectation, saying one thing but feeling another. And finally, the fourth Brahma Vihara is equanimity, ayakema again. The last of our four friends is the crowning glory of all emotions. Equanimity as the crowning glory of all emotions. Equanimity is even-mindedness, the understanding that everything arises and passes away. Everything is momentary. In meditation, we all see this flux, right? Back and forth. We all sometimes leave the path and find ourselves a few minutes later thinking about something from the past or planning for the future. Everything is momentary. In meditation, we see this. Equanimity has to have some basic insights. Acceptance of the way things are. The far enemy of equanimity is anxiety, restlessness. Its near enemy is indifference. The far enemy of equanimity is anxiety and restlessness. Its near enemy is indifference. And she clarifies this even further by saying indifference is intentional unconcern. Intentional unconcern. She states that indifference is a cold rejecting, an attitude of I don't care what's happening to others as long as it doesn't happen to me or mine. Using disinterest as a way to protect and keep everything all about me, I, or mine. But equanimity is based on impermanence, that everything is in constant change. Security is a myth. Security is an illusion. There is no security, as everyone is subject to decay. Everyone is subject to disease. Everyone dies. Equanimity will have to be embedded with some basic insights to grow within us. And one of the things it has to have and contain is acceptance. Acceptance of the way things are. This creates equanimity. Acceptance of the way things are creates equanimity, and equanimity creates security in the heart. Before we end tonight, I would like to end with a few words from Norman Fisher about finding the meaning in all this with reassurance and clarity. Suffering is such a drastic word, it sounds like a rare thing. Dukkha, or suffering, refers to the profound fact that everything is impermanent, ungraspable, and not really knowable. Dukkha is not a mistake. It is not a correctable situation. Dukkha is every moment, every experience of our lives, not just the things that obviously seem to be dukkha, like pain, suffering, and loss. But impermanence could also be and can also be incredibly beautiful if you receive it with equanimity. It could be peace itself. Impermanence could also be incredibly beautiful if you receive it with equanimity. It could be peace itself. So suffering, if we relate to it properly, is an advantage for the spiritual path. We need to learn how to turn toward suffering, really take it in, find the meaning in it, and let it open a path for us to new life. We need to learn how to turn toward suffering, really take it in, find the meaning in it, and let it open a path for us in our new life. And I'd like to end with an intentions verse from Larry Yang, one that I think is so beautiful and so wonderful, and I hope that you can take it with you and have the same experience that so many of us have had with this. Larry is a senior teacher in insight meditation. If I cannot be loving in the moment, can I be kind? If I cannot be kind, can I be non-judgmental? If I cannot be non-judgmental, can I not cause harm? And if I cannot not cause harm, could I cause the least amount of harm possible? May the benefits of our time tonight be allowed to all. May our efforts benefit all. Namaste.